Welcome to 20% Time, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes of Titan, a web consultancy based out of Chicago, but entirely remote with employees spread out across North America. We specialize in Laravel, a PHP framework, but we're often pairing that with any number of JavaScript frameworks and libraries and doing all sorts of fun stuff. And it's that sort of extra fun stuff that we do that I think we're going to mostly talk about today. I'm your host, Dave Hicking, and this week I'm joined by Jake, a programmer here at Titan. Jake, how's it going?
Hello, Dave. How are you?
Pretty good. So for people who don't know you, Jake, who are you? What do you do?
I'm Jake. I'm Jake Bathman on everything. I think it's easy to have your full first and last name when you have a weird name, because nothing is ever taken for domain names or usernames or anything like that. So why not just full first and last name? I've been a programmer. Is that what we call it? Programmer?
Yeah, we call it
at
programmer
Titan?
now. Yeah.
I'm a programmer at Titan for a little over 2 years now. Was it 2018? Yeah, 2 years.
Wait, you started in 2018?
I think that's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Is that right?
Feels like longer.
No, that's right. Yeah, because
Jake's like, no, it feels just about right.
well, I have 3 kids, and each of them was born when I was at a different job, and like close to right after I started at most of the jobs. So right after I started here, I actually was working here for like a week, and then went on some paternity leave.
It's a good time to get a job.
Exactly. Yeah. A little downtime.
That's right. That's right. So we've got Jake on the show today, not necessarily to talk about Laravel or any interesting, fun JavaScript stuff, but instead to talk about the world of Slack bots and apps and all sorts of stuff like that. Jake, don't worry. I'm not proclaiming that you know the answers to all. I know that Slack is, we'll say, investing heavily in this area. And I feel like every time I go to look at the documentation or feature list, they've added something different. But you're pretty active with sort of messing around with this sort of stuff at Titan. And messing around is actually too loose of a word. Like, you've actually done interesting stuff that we use all the time at Titan. So before we get into that, I want to start at square one, because if you've used Slack at all, you've probably run across a bot or an app or an integration. And I think people sometimes use those terms interchangeably. So what are those things? Do they mean the same thing? And why should people care about them?
They mostly mean the same thing. Slack uses the term app to indicate if you've done anything with development before in a third party, like developers.twitter.com or whatever it is, the thing that you create in that environment to give you a secret token to call an API, Slack calls that an app. And then your app can do a ton of stuff. So one of the things it can do is have a bot user. So if you've got a user that's just going to post stuff in your channel every time, like GitHub's Slack app, you can have it post a message in a certain channel every time a build fails or something like that. That's GitHub's bot user. It has a little GitHub icon, and it says GitHub, and it might have like the word bot next to the name. But apps in a Slack context can do like dozens of different other additional things. And there's these little feature toggles for what you want to turn on. So Slack can notify you every time somebody posts a message in a certain channel, or you can get a little ping whenever there's a URL with a certain host name. Like if you wanted to unfurl anything with the jakebathman.com domain, you could have Slack let you know every time somebody posts a URL with jakebathman.com as the host name, and you could send back some pretty formatted thing. So app as the high level surface is what they would call it. But there's also a ton of other stuff. I think now they have something I've never really messed with. If you're in Slack, or if you next time you're in Slack, there's an apps section, I guess you'd call it, in the sidebar. And an app can also present stuff there. So if Trello wanted to, they could make part of their Trello app, when you go to like Trello.com, they could make a version of that within Slack and have, your workflow kind of live within the Slack application instead of kicking you out to a normal website. So there's tons of stuff you can do with that. Most people are going to be familiar with basic bot users, like posting GIFs and things like that.
What's interesting about the app section on the left, you just called it out, I can't say I've ever really paid attention to it, is that it has, like, there are apps that we have integrated with our Slack at Titan that should be there, but you have to manually add them. So,
Yes.
right, so we use Slab, and I just added Slab, and by default, it sort of makes it almost look like I'm DMing with a bot for the Slab app, but there's like a tabbed interface at the top. And the first tab is home. And if you click on that, all of a sudden I view my favorite things in Slab. I have a shortcut to create a new post. I'm viewing things that are recently viewed. That's actually like more useful than I would have assumed. And I
Mhm.
guess I'm trying to figure out why wouldn't they pre-populate that? Because that's just not discoverable like at all. You have to go hunting to find that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and Slab, when they made their Slack app, I don't know for sure. I don't know the people at Slab, but they would have had to have. That's like a piece you have to make yourself. You have to tell, have a piece of your application that Slack will use to say, okay, when a user goes to the home tab of your app in the apps section, which again, if like Dave said, if you've never actually been there before, it's like super buried. they don't easily help you find this. They have a part of their API that returns all those things, so that they can make this little view for you that you're seeing right now, Dave.
That's interesting. Yeah. So prior to, I'd say maybe, I don't know when the switch happened. Maybe I want to say like 6 or 9 months ago, but maybe before then. But like, I feel like initially most people's interaction with the idea of like an app or a bot in Slack was like a GIF bot basically, or like something sort of light to try to like, bring some sort of levity to a remote team. And we definitely have those at Titan for sure, but we also have some things that are useful and productive. We talked about like some third party ones, but we have some internal ones that we've used as well, right? Because you wrote the is in bot, correct?
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
This is a brainchild of friend of the show, Daniel Colborn, and I. We were at a client meeting, or a client on site a couple of years ago, and Titan was, we had just done our on site, I think Titan had, and there was a funny discussion about in our general channel, like nobody likes the presence indicators in Slack. They're not useful enough, the little green dot or a little circle empty dot for are you online or offline? Because sometimes, like for me, my green dot is probably always lit up, but I might not be working at the time. So we were trying to come up with a system of what do you put in the general channel that could like tell people that you're here, that you're in for the day and you're available if somebody wants to ping you. And so Colbert and I had thought that a simple like @ symbol and then either the words in or out would be a good kind of starting place for that. And you could do @ break or @ lunch or something like that. So we wanted that to also be a useful tool. So the first question, the reason that we would be doing that is because somebody might say, they might get to work and say, hey, is Dave in right now? And instead of scrolling back up through the general channel, which can be kind of large if we get on a tangent, and just trying to find Dave's name or doing some like find in the search bar for the last time Dave did an @ symbol, that's kind of tedious. So I built is in bot, which is not the best name for a bot I've ever had. But it actually doesn't have a bot user. That's the funny thing. So we're talking about Slack apps. You have to tell a Slack app if you want it to have a bot user, somebody that shows up and can be @ mentioned. Isinbot doesn't have one of those if you've ever tried to @ mention it. But what it does is exposes a slash command, /isin, and then you can @ mention somebody, and they don't get the @ mention, but you do /isin @ dhicking or whatever your Slack username is, and you'll get an ephemeral message. So Slack has two types of messages that an application can send to a channel: a normal one, which everybody can see, and an ephemeral one, which only the person that did something can see. So if you type a / command, you get an ephemeral message. You can only see the result of that. So isinbot goes through the history of the general channel for the last day and says, has Dave said @ something? And then kind of compiles all the times you've said that. If you said @ lunch and then you said @ back sometime after that, what is your current status? And tells that to the user. So that was kind of fun to do. That's living right now. And I kind of like that that's all that it does. It's just this tiny little thing that just tells you what the status of somebody is, if they're in or not.
And it's interesting because I think we've had this like culture that is built up around that, where obviously we have lots of in jokes about like people being funny with it, but also before we jumped on this recording, we like I said @ podcasting like with Jake, and so like if somebody does /isin my username, I think it'll return podcasting. Is that right?
No, it will not. Because there's too many things that'll be an @ something.
That's
so
true.
Right now I just did it for you, and you're in.
Okay, that's good.
2 hours ago.
That's
because
true.
You said the word back.
That's true.
So it's true. You're still in. So it's kind of a whitelist. We don't need to get into why we have some of them blue right now, but there's a kind of a wide support. I've kind of slowly been adding more things just based on how people talk.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be the only thing in the message. If you say like, I'm going to be out for the next hour or something like that,
right.
then your status will still be set to out. But it's a whitelist for in, out, lunch, back, BRB, break, and then a couple of emoji too. So if you just type the coffee emoji, your status will be on a break for
Oh, that's
20
pretty good.
minutes.
I
And then
didn't
it'll
realize we
auto
had them.
expire.
I didn't realize we were responding to them. I mean, I should have known that you had it responding to emojis, but yeah.
There's only two, I think, the coffee emoji and the tea emoji for
Yeah.
the non-coffee people in our work.
I appreciate
And
that.
then also the timer emoji, and then the teacup
Oh,
emoji.
yeah, I
for
use that one.
Or no, tea and then timer.
Yeah,
So tea
tea
time.
time.
We'll
Yeah.
do it too. Yeah. But if you just say like, man, I'm really loving my teacup emoji today,
Oh,
like
yeah.
that won't set you on a break. It has to it's more specific than that, because I don't want to over assume too much. But I noticed that some people were doing that and added support for it.
And you're right. Like it sounds kind of maybe possibly silly, but it is super useful. The ability for anybody at the company, but especially for like people who work across different projects at Titan, right? Whether it's me or Matt or Dan or anybody else like that, to sort of have an idea of, I need to DM. I'd like to get like a response from Jake about this, but like I don't know if he's in right now, and it shows up as green. But like you said, sometimes like it might show up as green, but actually you just stepped away like 5 minutes, like a couple minutes ago, and it hasn't switched to green yet. You know what I mean? Like the way that Slack handles the way that Slack handles statuses, it's not as nuanced as I think you kind of need, right? I think if you are only, I don't know, I feel like it might have made sense for how Slack worked and how people use Slack, like when Slack first came out, like 7 years ago, whatever. But like, I don't know. I really appreciate is Inbot. And I think that's like an interesting example of something that is not a full-fledged, like it's not trying to have like a big like app interface or anything like that. It's a slash command. You've got something listening on the back end. Like it feels kind of lean, but it's really useful.
And it's actually the only Slack thing so far that I've made that I've thought about publishing to the directory. There's some additional work I'd have to do to get that going. Also to provide some way for people to customize their nomenclature for whether they're in or out, or if they want to support emoji or something like that.
Oh, interesting.
Got to think through a couple of those things, but I mean, that's what Slack apps are nice, because they start private, basically in your workspace. That's what Slack calls, your group, your team, that your Slack is in. So you install it to that workspace when you create a new app, even if it does just one thing. And then there's a whole checklist of things you have to go through and do. You have to make sure that you don't have any secrets. Like it's not assuming a certain team ID, which is what they call a workspace ID. It's not assuming any credentials, because it has to use OAuth for the person that's installing it. Somebody I don't know is going to install it to a workspace I'm not in. I have to make sure that it's not pulling anything from our workspace, or it's going to only look at theirs. So there's a whole checklist of things I've been thinking about going through and actually publishing it just to kind of go through that process.
Yeah, it's interesting. I bet, what does it use, like a YAML file to define statuses or some sort of thing like that, where you can sort of say like, look out for these things. Like I could imagine that being I don't know if that's how it works, but
it's not. It's in the PHP file. It's
okay, it's actually just in the code.
Class. But even then, so think about if you like, we just installed this. We actually just removed it. But we had installed this app from the Slack. I don't know what they call it. App. Their
Directory,
app store, whatever they call it. I can't say app store because Apple would slap them. But yeah, whatever their app directory is. We called Song Whip, which is really cool. If you post a link in any channel to like a Spotify song or a Apple Music, whatever, it'll send you back the Song Whip bot or whatever it is. Will post a link to songwhip.com/whatever, and that page will have. So if you're an Apple Music, which I think you are an Apple Music guy, and I'm a Spotify guy mostly, so if I post a Spotify link, you can get the Apple Music link, which is so it's a super helpful little bot. But the problem for things like that is once a user installs it, the best place for them to make those kind of customizations is in Slack itself. And that's like within the slash command or something like that, like /set-is-in or something like that. And you can do some customizations. I'm trying to think through if that's possible. You could have a website where somebody, they customize their stuff. Like if you've ever used the app called Polly, which is like a polling app. Polly has a great web interface for making a new poll and stuff like that. So you could have a way to customize it on the web for people, but they would never have access to any. I wouldn't want, it'd need to be like a dashboard control panel type thing with nice switches and buttons and maybe some preset sets of things to search for. So that's part of the reason I haven't published it yet. Is just it seems like a very specific tool to our workspace with how we use it. And I honestly don't even know if anybody would find it useful or not. But I kind of still want to publish it just to do it.
So one thing you talked about a little bit earlier was a slash command, which is something that I think most Slack users are familiar with, but it's the idea, it's literally like slash some word and then some action that you can do, right? Like, or sometimes no action at all, right? Like slash Zoom will launch a Zoom call if you have Zoom installed. Slash Giphy will, and then type the name of a GIF, and you get a little thing that lets you select from GIFs. The really important things that you need to
very important
do your job on a day-to-day basis. And I bring that up because one thing that you've been working on with a bunch of other folks at Titan lately is an internal tool. I don't think we've talked about this anywhere publicly, but why not? It's called RAM.
I don't think we have.
And it is effectively a snippet. It's like code snippets for a team. Is that a decent way to describe it?
Yeah, it's our own private gists, which the whole team, the whole workspace can see. It's a website. I mean, we'll talk about the Slack piece of it, but yeah, it's just for our company, where we can share. It's basically gists, and we also can feel comfortable sharing things like from client projects that other people have worked on, where in other gists or publicly we don't want to share. So internal code and things like that.
And one of the things that I know you've been working on as a piece of that is a Slack app for that. And the Slack app has taken, I feel like, multiple forms, right? It can do, it seems like compared to IsInBot, which is somewhat like limited in what it does and what you ask it to do. This is, so I'll make sure I get this right. So we have the ability to search RAM, to post to RAM, and we can do that both from slash commands and a UI. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, so there's, so
that's a lot.
This is another feature of an app that you can have. I don't remember what they call, I think they call them modals. So if anyone hasn't used this in Slack before, you'd be familiar with the basic concept of a modal from websites, where if you click something, a smaller box pops up in the middle, and maybe the background would go gray, and it would have a couple of form inputs or something like that. Maybe a login page would do that. So in Slack, an app can have modals, and they're composed using their own JSON syntax called block kit, which is very cool. And it's a way for you to kind of have different form inputs or buttons or little text areas or multi-select boxes, and compose them in just a big JSON blob. And when you post it to a certain endpoint, there's the whole, I'm oversimplifying it for sure, but it'll show a little modal to the user that did something like slash RAM or clicking a message. So then I think everybody, if you use Slack, you should have the new Slack. It's kind of like the new Coke.
So it does feel a little like there's a new Coke thing, new Coke vibe going on with new Slack, but that's a whole other conversation.
There really is. Yeah. We've, especially when you get to the iOS new Slack.
Oh my God.
But, so everybody should have the message actions. I think that's either message actions or message actions have maybe existed already, but global actions I think are new. So there's multiple places. What do they call them? They call them like touch points or points of interaction from within Slack that your app can surface. So if you are typing something in a channel, there's a little lightning bolt to the left of your text box, and those are global actions. So the app can make one available there. So we have create new entry in RAM there. Or if you hover over a message, you can do the little vertical three dots, and then there's save a message as snippet, which I probably need to unify those messages because they do the same thing basically, which is open up a modal in Slack, either with empty content for your new thing in RAM, which could just be a single line of a bash command for something that you forgot how to do and you had to go look up. We've done, how do you compose or require something with a version? Because I have to look that up every time. So that's like perfect for RAM.
Right.
And then you can select some tags for your thing and then submit it. So all three of those touch points, though, the slash command, which is slash RAM, the global shortcut, and the message shortcut all do the same thing, which is start creating a new entry in RAM. And once the user hits save, it'll be posted to a channel as a new RAM entry, which entry I don't like the name of, but that's what we call it.
Yeah.
And then there's the slash RAM search, which isn't actually implemented right now. This is still in PR, actually. We've just been playing with it. It's actually just running on a private server of mine for testing stuff, which we'll get into that, why one annoyance I have with Slack, developing Slack stuff. But
yeah, we should probably get that moved to. We should probably get that moved to one of our servers.
Well, we gotta do once the PR goes through, then it'll work. But without a PR, it won't work. So then it will be.
So Titan is a completely remote agency, and Slack is where we spend like all of our, well, I should say all of our time. I'm not a developer, so I spend almost all my time in Slack. But aside from actually writing code, Slack is the other sort of default place for pretty much everybody at Titan to be. So, seems to make sense that you might invest some time or effort into like either building a bot or an app, or like really configuring like Slack to really like be connected to all the things that you want.
Mhm.
If someone's listening to this and they use Slack, but they're not like, I mean, they might be remote right now, but maybe they're not always remote, or they're sort of like half in on Slack or half out. Do you think you have to like really be like invested in Slack and living there like day to day for it to be for like bots and apps to be useful? Or do you think it's the kind of thing where even if you're kind of a light user of Slack, you should be looking into this?
You mean for creating one of your own, or using the ones
Let's
that are
start with
already...
creating one of your own. Yeah.
Creating one of your own is a pain.
Okay, good. We should talk about that at some point.
Yes, we can talk about that for a number of reasons. It's a pain. To do what we want to do with
Yeah.
like Blockkit is really nice, and doing a lot of the more advanced features is nice. They make it easy if you want to do it. Their API is wonderful. Their documentation is very thorough. I've very rarely had an issue where I get like an error that's undocumented back or something like that, or some kind of an issue. Lots of public APIs, really good stuff. OAuth flow is very good. But there's a lot of overhead for kind of getting one built. There are some things that they make available. What do they call them? If you go into your admin panel or whatever, it's on the web. This is not within Slack, where you can see all the apps you've made. This is not writing apps again. This is like configuring the ones you already have. There are some built-in things you can do, like webhooks, for example. So you can create an incoming webhook for one channel. And this is, again, not anything with developing. This is like a built-in app that Slack makes available to you. And you can, let's say you wanted to make an app, or you already had an app, and it's a Laravel app or whatever, and it's going to do a thing, and it's going to take an hour to run a job or to do something. It could be just something locally. You're running a script and it's going to take an hour, and you'd like to know in Slack when that's done. You can, without having to code anything for this from the Slack side, without needing any special OAuth or anything like that, and having to deal with users or permissions, you can go to the web. It's whatever your Slack workspace is, slack.com/apps, and then make a new like incoming webhook. And they give you a URL, https slack.whatever /long unguessable string. And if you post to that endpoint, whatever you post gets sent to that channel just as a message. You don't get to do a lot of crazy custom formatting. You don't get to make it look pretty. But if you just want to know when the .sh file that runs for 30 minutes on your local machine is done, you can create an incoming webhook. Things like that are super useful. And there's a lot of stuff that you might want to reach for a Slack app to do that can be done using built-in incoming and outgoing webhooks, using the built-in Slack bot. You can make slash commands just using the website. So you make a new slash command and you tell it /what, and then you can give it it gives you a little a way to post to that URL or something that's going to send you. And it's super, super simple. You can do it all without having to make an app yourself. If you're just like roughly development minded, they make a lot of stuff available for you like that. If you want to be more customized about it, or if you want to publish it to the Slack app directory, they do call it the app directory, by the way. You'll have to make an actual app yourself.
But yeah, and also if you're interested in doing stuff with webhooks, I mean, what you can configure with Zapier to then send to Slack via webhook is super powerful. We use it all the time at Titan for stuff, right? So we have like a whole, God, someday I'll have to, on this podcast, talk about how much I don't want to say abuse, how much we utilize truly all the features in Zapier to do things like, because, when we have contracts that get signed or things like that, I would love to know about it in Slack. Like I love to know immediately. And, not all of our tools give us that kind of thing, but, webhooks are extremely powerful for that kind of notification stuff, as you just said. And Zapier already brings lets a lot of those things. I'm using talk with quotations. You all can't see me because this is a audio only podcast. Lets them talk together. Really, they're just sending webhooks back and forth. But yeah, I've used webhooks a lot for that, but I never really thought about doing my own slash command. And now you got me thinking, I might have to experiment with that. It's
super, super easy. You do have to do a little bit of coding because you have to you'll receive, they'll post something to you. If you do /whatever, you'll have to have something running on a server that can receive that slash whatever and then send something back. It could be the same thing every time. If you wanted to just do like a funny face or something like that, or a certain GIF, you could do it just with the slash command like that, but you'd have to have something to return. And there's a ton of additional built-in apps. So we use the Twitter Slack app a lot. I think we have like 30 something configurations of it. Either for some people's tweets are put into our social channel. We also have like a DevOps channel that has a couple of main services we use, like GitHub, their status bot, or I think it's just their Twitter account, or other Twitter accounts that deal with services that we use. We have them posted. Every tweet that they send gets posted to a social channel or a DevOps channel or something like that. So there's a bunch of stuff that's already an app that you don't have to make yourself. You can just configure it with a couple clicks.
So it sounds like there is a bit of a learning curve if you really want to dive into to building a Slack app. Is that fair to say?
If you want to make it complicated, then yes. It's not super. If you've done anything with basic OAuth stuff and you know how to post and receive stuff, especially Laravel makes it extra easy. You set up a route that you want Slack to post to. Most of that's relatively simple. And then there've been enough people do this that if you have any weird issue, you can find answers readily available on GitHub. There's also a bunch of Slack clients for like API clients as packages, like a Laravel app package that you can install.
That makes a lot of sense.
For RAM, we rolled our own because I kind of wanted to do it again from scratch. So we have a custom middleware and some custom classes that'll do the client calling and things like that, because I didn't think it would meet our needs very well.
So if the fine people at Slack were happening to be listening to this, what are some things that you think they could change or add that would make your ability or your desire to build Slack apps just that much greater?
Well, Dave, as you know,
you're a professional Slack user.
I'm a professional emoji adder to Slack.
That is true.
I looked it up. I have 569 custom emojis added to the Titan workspace. That's mostly new emojis. Some aliases are in that as well. So I've added some emojis. There are no good API endpoints. There are no public API endpoints for getting information about the emojis in a workspace. I think there's one non-enterprise public API endpoint that'll tell you all the emoji in your workspace. Just list them out, their names, what you type into Slack to make them, and then a URL for the image. And that's it. Doesn't give you who made it, doesn't give you when it was created. There's no event that you can set up. Events API we didn't even get to, but events is one of the things where Slack will send your web application something when a payload when something happens. So when a user posts a link or every message to a channel, but it could be events like a new emoji was added. I would love an events API endpoint for the Slack emoji when a new one's made or one's deleted. Please, Slack, please. I just want to have a bot that keeps score of how many emoji everybody has added and notify everybody when a new one's made. Please, that's all I want. I've literally been waiting and asking for this for over 4 years now.
I'm just imagining like slash emoji stats and then like, maybe a date range, and it tells you like you could get real creative with an emoji stats bot for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had all those thoughts and I want to build it, but they won't let me.
Emojis aside, is there anything else that really pops into mind that they could either, I mean, you could approach this from two different ways, right? It could be more capability, or it could be lowering the barrier entry for that sort of basic capability that they already have.
Honestly, if you know what you want to build, you can build it really, really easily just with their documentation. It's probably some of the best API documentation. It's really thorough. Every reference document also has, every method reference also for an API has a list of every error you might get with the description. It has a list of all the parameters that you would need. Most of the guides have like a little mini tutorial in them with good example code. Not even just for PHP. It's just very, very good. It takes time, and they're in a transition period right now where they're moving stuff from this old method of interactions, how an app used to just, like, if you wanted your app to do what RAM does, where it has a little text input with some buttons, that used to be a message, and the message itself inline maybe it would just be showing to you, but it would be inline, like a normal Slack message from a bot would have a big text area and some buttons, and it was horrific. You can kind of still do that, but they're moving to this block kit thing, and so the API documentation's in kind of a transition state right now. But even just like labeling stuff as old for documentation, like this is a method that's no longer in use. Please migrate to our new Slack or block kit integration type with a link to that. They've done a lot of stuff to make it super, super easy to go through and build pretty much whatever you want. There's some new things you'll have to learn. Like I mentioned, a middleware. So you don't have to give your app like a shared secret between when Slack is going to post something to your app, to your server, whatever it is. You don't have to have some shared secret that you just verify that you have to store in an env file somewhere. You have like a signing token. So in a middleware, you have to compute this signing hash of the payload. It's super complicated. But they make it easy where you don't have to have any weird tokens or anything like that. There's no weird user management stuff. Tons of stuff is configurable on the app, like the developer console. You don't have to do any weird commands. There's no command line thing to do. They've done a ton of work in this. And I'm assuming that, because I think about that too, when I see like the GitHub Slack app, there's a team of people, probably GitHub, at least a handful of people that manage their like points of contact like that. They have their Slack app running, and they're in the same developer console that I am on slack.com/apps/whatever it is. They're doing all the same stuff. And I'm sure they're finding it perfectly capable because it does everything that everyone small and large would need. So I honestly don't think that they need to lower the barrier to entry. It's just getting your head around some of the nomenclature and the terms of how their API calls stuff, and then just making it. So, the one thing that this reminds me of that I don't know if it's possible. So this is the reason why the RAM Slack bot is running on my own server right now is, so let's take a scenario.
Okay.
You do /RAM because you want to add something. You, Dave, have come up with some nice way to do something. You want to store it in RAM.
All the time. Sure.
All the time. So you do /RAM, and our RAM Slack app has said, hey, anytime someone uses the /command /RAM, post that event to this endpoint, to this URL. And we've already set that up in a Laravel app. Well, when I'm writing this locally, I can look at their documentation. I see what that event payload is going to look like. I have the big, huge JSON. It's got all the different keys about like who initiated the /RAM, in what channel was it, what's the team ID, all this jazz. And then I write all the code that say like, okay, we need to show the modal or respond back to the user with the current weather or whatever it's going to be. Testing that locally is basically impossible because Slack can't get to your workspace locally. It can't get to your computer when it's posting to something. It needs a publicly available URL.
Right.
And you could use something like ngrok, and that's probably a decent way to do it. But there's not a good solution for when you're developing something, testing that locally. And I have another personal Slack workspace that I do a lot of that testing in. I can deploy something to just a private server and do some tests and use my own Slack workspace without installing it on our Titan workspace yet. I don't know if that's for Slack to do, but there's got to be a way to make that part of it easier. Because especially if you're new to this, you do a lot of like writing to logs. Like as soon as you get an API post from Slack, you're just writing it to the log just to look at, okay, what the hell does this look like? I want to know, I want to figure out how to peruse this. Which pieces of this do I need? But you've got to do that in a public server. So it's just, there's a little bit of weird chicken before the egg thing that you have to do for that. They could make it easy to have some kind of a web interface where they say, oh, you're just creating your new thing. You want to test out the events API endpoint. Okay, here's test.slack.com/blah, blah, blah. Go here. And there's just this little live log output of all these events that you've said you want from your workspace. And we'll just post all that stuff here and you can see what it's all looking like and maybe download it or something. Something like that could be a nice tool for being able to test these endpoints where they're posting something to you. There's a lot of it is asynchronous like that. They're sending something to you and they want you to do something with it and reply back. And without having something already deployed, that's kind of difficult to initiate.
You strike me as the kind of person who might have whether it's a notes doc or a bear doc or something where you keep like ideas or like we have a whole channel called Half Baked Italian, right? But like, were you strike me as the kind of person who might have some random ideas floating around for Slack apps or bots that you might want to get to one day. Is there a particular one that comes to mind that you'd like to build, but you just haven't had a chance to do so yet?
It's in things for me.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Um, yes. So is in bot. Matt Stauffer has said this, he wants this, and I think it would be a good idea. I've just got to figure out how to implement it, which is like, if I get in the morning and I say /is in at Dave Hicking,
Yeah.
and is in bot says, oh, I haven't heard from Dave today, so I'm assuming he's out. I want to be able to say, all right, tell me when he gets in. So
remind me.
I need to talk to him. Yeah. Well, here's the message I was going to send to him. I had the idea to call this like /delay. So you'd be like /delay at Dave Hicking, something. And then as soon as you do your @in, is inbot would say, hey, I have a delayed message for him, and it would DM it to you from the person. From the person would be tedious, or you have to like say like, hey, this is from Matt. He delayed it an hour ago or something. But some way to asynchronously say, I need to talk to this person. Either let me know when they're in or send them this when they get in. I think that would be a good next feature for Isinbot to do.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I would use that all the time.
There's a little bit of, especially when Colburn was here, if he's listening, he would be happy about this, that we're still trying to not track anybody. We don't want to be
That's
creepy.
true.
So what the bot doesn't do is it doesn't get every message from the general channel and store it somewhere. And then when somebody asks for a status, it already knows the status. It doesn't do that. It does it gets all the messages in general every single time someone invokes it and computes their status as of that time. And so if somebody edits a message or something, it'll do it every time it's called, and we don't store anything. We don't store any status information about anybody ever. I don't want to. So storing something like that, I want everything to be like ephemeral. Like if Dave just doesn't come in today, I don't know what to do with that message. I don't want to keep it around for multiple weeks or be like tracking whether or not we've sent something to you. I don't want to track message content. Like what if it's private? I don't need to see what that is. So there's things like that we need to figure out first. But I think it would be kind of cool to have something like that.
I mean, the ability to send a delayed message should really be built into Slack, actually.
It should be.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, that is a common feature in more enterprisey email setups, right? Like Outlook has been able to, for a long time, like delay when I'm going to send this message. And I believe there are like Gmail, I think like plugins or like labs, like there are things add-ons that you can use to do that sort of thing. And as Slack increasingly goes after the big enterprise market, that feels like a thing that people are going to want, right? Because they've got the like, thing where if someone has do not disturb turned on and you send a message, it won't notify them until do not disturb comes off. But do not disturb and your is in status is not the same thing.
Right. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. My do not disturb could expire in the morning at 6:00, but I'm not going to get until 8.
Right.
And I could just ignore your message, which that's what I'd probably do.
Yeah. I mean, sure. Who doesn't?
But yeah, and this is maybe a particular thing because we want to really focus on the work-life balance.
Yeah.
And Matt, if your boss DMs you at any time, you're going to respond to it. Like
even though
even if he tells you at the beginning, do not respond to this until tomorrow morning, do not read this message, you're going to read it, and you're probably going to work and respond to it, even if he tells you not to, just because, I don't know, that's also the kind of people that we are. If it doesn't seem super important, somebody might not, but we're not just going to ignore it. So having an actual delayed implementation would probably work better.
Yeah, I was going to say, because what I do is I don't want any little notification badge on my Slack icon on my phone, but I do want notifications. So if I ever see that pop up, I'm going in, and if I'm not responding, I'm sending it to my things to-do list so I can deal with it in the morning.
I do snooze. Snooze. Show me this tomorrow morning, and Slackbot reminds me about it, and I just keep hitting snooze because I'm not ready for it yet. But that's probably what Slack would say. Why they don't have a first party implementation of this is because they want it to be controlled by. They want the user to determine what they're going to receive and when they're going to receive it, and not the sender. But I don't know. That would be nice to have. And then I have tons of other small apps. I started writing chatbots my God, it was like 8 or 9 years ago in GroupMe, which is like another group chat client. I've written stuff for Discord as well. And so I have ideas going back far back to that too, just stuff that would be nice to implement and I probably will never have time to do, but it'd be kind of fun. One day, that's TM, I will.
What's been your favorite part so far about learning how to build Slack apps, whether it's at Titan or elsewhere? Because you just said that you've been building these kind of like apps or bots for chat things for a little while. But is there anything particularly interesting or just cool that you've learned about doing this recently?
Um, I mean, most of the time when I'm building things like this, I think it's either providing something fun or providing some utility, and I think it's nice to not be helpful in that way, but to like reduce friction points. So I have a personal Slack with like some gaming buddies, and we have Tribot in there, which is like our joke about being tryhards, which we're not. This is like a 10-year-old gaming joke. And so Tribot does a bunch of useful things. Like if somebody goes live on Twitch, it'll post their Twitch link and say like, hey, this person's streaming right now. Or there's a bunch of other stuff to do with like the status of the PlayStation Network or things like that we kind of re-implemented from the GroupMe days, but they're just things that allow us to be in one place and share things with each other a little bit easier. And it's nice that Slack has made just the basic / commands still very easy from the beginning. I recently was doing some more work in Discord for some bots, and it's nice, but like you realize when you start to work on other big APIs for chat things that it's not as nice as Slack, and they don't make it as easy to do certain things. And their move to this block kit format for how you render things that an app can show to the user is really nice. And they've been doing a very good job about it. So I'm glad that we're in Slack and not somewhere else. I don't know what the alternative would be for our workspace, but for personal stuff as well, it makes it, they don't want to make it hard for you to do what you want to do and make it look really nice too. So if that doesn't continue to ever be the case, I'll be very sad, because right now it's really nice.
So that's all I have for questions, Jake, about this. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about or that we didn't talk about that you think we should at least mention about Slack bots or apps or sort of how we use them or anything like that?
Do you have a favorite emoji?
Oh, do I have a favorite emoji? We have a new one that's pretty good, which is LOL sob. Have you seen this one?
Oh, is that the one with like it's like two emoji faces that
right.
are kind
Split.
of slash combined together?
Yeah.
I think I remember seeing that. Yeah.
That's pretty
That
good.
is a good one.
That's a pretty good
very
one.
good.
I mean,
I think Jose added that one.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
That's pretty good. I don't know. We have a lot of custom emojis that we use all the time for stuff. It's one of those things where it's like, some of them I don't know if I want to talk about it. Not that they're bad or anything, but like, well, there's one that's funny. We don't really use it often. It's one I made called Matt Disappoint, which is just it's Matt's little head when he was like faking disappointment on a Zoom call. And
That's pretty good.
I snagged it and I use that one like very rarely, because Matt, we're talking about Matt Stauffer, our CTO. Matt is overwhelmingly like never like disappointed or like upset with us or anything, like, you know what I mean? But it was just like sometimes you got to get it as an emoji. How about you, Jake? I know you've been waiting the entire time to be asked this question. Jake,
I wanted to talk about.
What is your favorite emoji in Slack?
Real-time follow-up. Lol sob is Sarah Bine. Made that one.
There you go.
I'm looking at the thing right now.
Thank you, Sarah.
I am really partial to one that I made. It's an inside joke of like, it's something about billing or things like that, but it's our Dannenball shooter.
Oh God,
it's
the Dannenball is good.
It's a little cartoony emoji, like think of an old school GIF from like GeoCities. Very cartoony of like an old timey cannon shooting something from the side.
Yeah.
And I went through frame by frame and edited out it had like confetti coming out of it or something. And I put like a cartoony T-bone steak being shot out of the cannon instead. Because we were talking about Dannenballs, and they were talking about shooting like meat at somebody. I don't even remember what we were talking about, but just making just a stupid emoji about like shooting a big steak out of a cartoon cannon.
It's bizarre. Like, it's so many layers deep of inside jokes, and it's one of the joys of working on something like Slack, right? Like where you get to try to explain to new people when they join, okay, so here's like the three stories you have to understand in order to even grok this emoji. But this is, I mean, that's not that different. It's funny. We recently posted a episode about like remote culture, right? All workplaces have like weird phrases or sayings or things like that that
Mm.
evolve over time. And a remote workplace like Titans, where we use Slack all the time, you're gonna have some of those sort of canonically captured in emojis. So yeah, that's a pretty good one.
I think Chris Trombley said that he had something about a beef cannon, and that's why we called it that. I'm going back to find the genesis. I don't know. So it's something about Chris that he said. Oh, this is just in our DMs. Oh my God, I made it for him in DMs.
Wow, you're really exposing the truth.
It was
there.
a typo. Oh no, he made a typo. So that's the one thing that my old GroupMe bots used to do that I don't do now. This is again the Daniel Colburn school of never remember me. Is I used to store every message because my bot would. That's how the GroupMe API worked. It was terrible. They're owned by Microsoft now, which did not make it better, by the way. In contrast to GitHub. So GroupMe would like send you every message. I would store every message in a huge table, and then I would do like stats about all the messages, and I could like look up old stuff. And looking back, that was not a good thing. Like I've since deleted all those with a vengeance. I don't want any of that, even though it was like, it was group messages, but still. So Slack, our Slack bots not getting everything is nice. And Slack makes it good to like segregate out what exactly you get. You don't necessarily, your bot doesn't just get everything. But having a good search will remind us that a DM between me and Chris, where I don't even remember what he made a typo and he said beef cannon instead, and so I made him a GIF called beef cannon. I'd forgotten about that. That's very funny. Yeah. Aside from favorite emoji, Dave, I think you've answered all the good questions, or asked all the good questions, and I have answered them very well.
I appreciate that, Jake, and thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. This has been fun. So you are at Jake Bathman everywhere, basically?
Everywhere. Yep. Yeah. I don't think I'm not there everywhere.
Okay. TikTok, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you can follow me on TikTok. That's my main platform right now for content creation.
You doing coding videos on TikTok?
Yeah, 15-second coding videos.
Does anybody do coding videos on TikTok?
I'm sure somebody does. There's people that do it. I got stuck watching a guy doing like close-up magic last night.